By the time I pushed open the heavy wooden doors of St. Bridget's, my uniform smelled like road dust and yesterday's rain. The church hit me with its usual wave of incense and old stone, the familiar sense of childhood Sundays, weddings, and the quiet Wednesday evenings when my grandmother used to sneak me into the back pew so I could listen to God think. The stained glass windows washed the nave in colors that felt out of place against the mood. Pale blues, blood reds, holy gold splashed over faces that were anything but serene. People were scared. You could feel it. Voices that usually rose in easy chatter after Mass were low and tight, words clipped short like they'd been rationed. Shoulders were hunched, not in reverence, but in tension. Even the candles seemed to burn closer to the wick, their flames pulled inward. I walked down the aisle, my boots thudding soft against the worn stone, and felt every pair of eyes track me. It wasn't the first time I'd come here in uniform, but it was the first time I'd brought the war with me. Captain Amara Lawson, I told myself under my breath, the way they'd taught us before addressing a superior. Ground yourself in your name, your rank, your purpose. Here on orders. The orders weren't on paper this time. They were in the frantic call from my mother the night before, her voice trembling. "Something's happening at the church, baby," she'd said. "There've been break-ins, threats. Father Miguel asked if you could come talk to the council. They're divided. Some people don't want soldiers involved." Some people I knew meant the church leader, the one who had baptized me, scolded me for chewing gum in the sanctuary, and told my mother with a frown that he wouldn't encourage this military nonsense when I'd enlisted. I hadn't been back in months. Deployments, training, distance, it all added up. But you don't say no when your mother says, "They're scared." You especially don't say no when the church in question sits 3 blocks from where you grew up, and just 8 blocks from the protests that had turned ugly 2 nights ago. So I'd driven all night, the highway a blur, my mind playing through scenarios like training sims, active shooter, vandalism, arson, or maybe just words, angry, scared people who'd decided the uniforms were the enemy and the church had to pick a side. I didn't know. All I knew was that fear makes people stupid, and stupid people make dangerous decisions. Near the front of the church, just before the altar rail, a small cluster of leaders stood in a tight semicircle. Father Miguel, tall and tired, rubbing at his temples. Deacon Russell, his face flushed. A few lay council members I recognized from childhood. And at the center, like the axis they all rotated around, Sister Agnes. She'd been old even when I was a kid. The kind of old that feels less like age, and more like she'd simply been here since the church was built, and nobody had gotten around to telling her time had passed. Her habit had shifted from black to navy over the decades, but her eyes were the same. Sharp, clear, impossible to lie to. She'd been the one who'd slipped me cookies when Grandma dragged me to extra choir practice. The one who'd pressed a rosary into my hand the day I left for basic training and said, "Don't let them teach you to hate, child, even when they ask." Now she stood with her hands folded, head slightly bowed, listening. As I approached, the murmur of the small group fractured and fell quiet. Father Miguel turned to me with a look that was equal parts relief and worry. "Amara," he said, "thank you for coming." "Of course, Father," I replied. "You said there were concerns." Before he could answer, Deacon Russell stepped forward, his jaw already tight. "This is entirely inappropriate," he said. "We don't need soldiers here. This is a house of God, not a military outpost." The words snapped through the air like a whip. A few people nearby turned to look. I stood a little straighter. The old instinct, to shrink, to apologize for taking up space, flared for a moment, then burned out. Too much had happened since the last time I let a man in a collar make me feel small. "I'm here because the church asked for help," I said, keeping my tone level. "My mother said there had been threats." "Idle talk," Russell said with a dismissive wave. "Young hotheads mouthing off. You bring armed forces into the sanctuary, you escalate. You send a message that we're choosing sides in a human conflict instead of trusting in divine protection." He looked at my uniform like it was a stain on the floor. "Respectfully," I said. "Bricks through stained glass windows at midnight, death threats left in the mailbox, and gasoline cans found behind the rectory don't sound like idle talk." Father Miguel winced at my bluntness. The council members exchanged glances. I'd told myself I'd approach this gently. My mouth had other ideas. "We filed a report," Father Miguel said quickly, trying to smooth things. "The police have increased patrols, but some parishioners are uneasy. They've asked if there's more we can do to keep the building and the shelter safe, especially at night. St. Brigid's wasn't just a place for Sunday worship. It was where the food pantry operated twice a week, where the shelter in the basement took in women and children on nights when the shelters downtown were full. It was where undocumented families came for legal aid and language classes, tucked safely under the umbrella of church business. If someone set fire to it, it wouldn't just be brick and wood lost. "Armed soldiers standing in the aisles won't calm people," Deacon Russell said. "It will frighten them, especially the most vulnerable. They've already seen enough guns in their lives." "I'm not here to stand in the aisles," I said. "And I'm not here with a squad. I'm here alone. Out of uniform, if you prefer." I glanced down at myself. Well, that horse already bolted, but you get the idea. A flicker of something like amusement crossed Sister Agnes's face, gone almost as soon as it appeared. "Then why are you here, Captain?" Russell pressed. He made my rank sound like a slur. "To show off? To make a point?" I met his gaze. Years ago, that would have made my stomach flip. Now, after staring down people whose decisions decided whether my team lived or died, a church deacon's disapproval barely registered. "I'm here," I said, "because this building houses people who can't go anywhere else. Because if someone decides to stop shouting and start acting, the police will arrive after the first blow is struck, not before. Because I know how angry crowds move, how fast fear turns into violence, and how to plan for it." "We have faith," he snapped. "So do I replied. "But God sent David into that valley with a sling, not empty hands." A low murmur rippled through the half-empty pews. Maybe I'd pushed too far. Maybe I'd hit too close to home. Russell's face darkened. "We don't need soldiers here," he said again, louder this time, deliberately. "We need prayer. We need repentance. We need to remind people that our hope is not in weapons, but in Christ." "Hope doesn't put out fires," I said before I could stop myself. "Extinguishers do. Evacuation plans do. Knowing which doors aren't blocked does." "Enough," Father Miguel said, raising a hand. "Both of you." He turned to me, his expression apologetic. "Amara, perhaps now isn't the time. Tensions are high. He stopped, because Sister Agnes had lifted her head. It was a small movement, barely more than an inch, but the effect on the group was immediate. Conversations in Catholic churches happen in many places, over coffee, in confessionals, on folding chairs after bingo. But when an elder nun who has outlived 3 pastors and 1 pope decides to speak, everyone listens. She stepped forward, the soft rustle of her habit barely audible over the hum of the fluorescent lights. "Child," she said, her voice roughened by age but steady. "Come here." For a second the child slid over my rank like warm water, soaking in deeper than Captain ever had. I found myself obeying without thinking, closing the distance between us until I stood just in front of her. She reached up, her hand small and wrinkled, veins a delicate map beneath thin skin, and touched the shoulder of my uniform where my insignia sat. "I remember when you first wore this," she said. "You were shaking so hard I thought the pins would rattle right off." A few people chuckled softly. I felt my ears burn. "You sat right there," she continued, nodding toward the 3rd pew on the left. "3rd from the aisle, next to your grandmother. And you cried through the whole Mass because you thought God would be angry you weren't going to be a nurse like she wanted." She wanted me to be safe, I murmured. She wanted you alive, Sister Agnes said. She did not yet know that staying can kill you just as surely as leaving. She dropped her hand from my shoulder and turned slowly to face the group, the lines in her face deepening. Listen to me, she said, and the quiet that fell over the church then was different. Not tense, expectant. I have lived through war, she said. Real war. Not the kind on television. The kind where soldiers marched past this very church when I was a girl. Boots on cobblestone, rifles on their shoulders. I have seen uniforms used for evil and for good. I have seen men bless guns from this altar. And I have seen women like her. She pointed at me without looking. Stand between death and the weak. Her words settled on my skin like ash. You say we do not need soldiers here, she went on, turning her eyes on Russell. You are wrong. We do not need conquerors. We do not need bullies. We do not need anyone who thinks a gun makes them God. But we do need protectors. We do need people who know how to keep a crowd from becoming a mob. We do need those who have chosen to stand in danger's path so others may pass to safety. She looked back at me, and for a heartbeat, the world narrowed to just her eyes and my thudding pulse. You don't know this, she said softly, but she already saved us. A small shock went through the gathered leaders. The words were meant for them, but hit me like a blow. What do you mean? Father Miguel asked, frowning. Sister, this is the first time she's been home in months. Sister Agnes folded her hands, her gaze drifting up toward the crucifix above the altar for a moment, before returning to us. Last winter, she said, when the city cut funding for the shelter program, what did we do? We appealed, Father Miguel said. We wrote letters. We staged a vigil. And, she prompted. And we were denied, he admitted. They said there wasn't room in the budget, that we'd have to close the basement shelter and refer people to the central facility downtown, which was already full. One of the council members added quietly. The women who sleep under this roof, Sister Agnes said, do not always feel safe downtown. Some cannot go there at all without being found by the men who hurt them. We were facing the prospect of turning them away into the snow. The memory rippled through the group like a shiver. I hadn't been home. I'd been half a world away, in a different cold, with a different kind of threat. And then, Sister Agnes said, I received a call. She looked at me. From her commanding officer. My breath caught. He asked if St. Bridget's was indeed sheltering women fleeing domestic violence. She continued. I said yes. He asked if we had received notice of closure. I said yes. He was very quiet for a moment. Then he said, one of my captains grew up there. She asked if there was any way we could help. Heat crawled up my neck. I remembered the conversation now. The report I'd read about base community outreach, the side comment from an intel tech about unused funds, the late-night call I'd made to a major in logistics I owed a favor. I told him the city had no money, Sister Agnes said. He replied, the city doesn't. We do. Turns out there was a grant, somewhere in the labyrinth, money set aside to support local resilience initiatives in high-risk communities. A pile of coins gathering dust while people froze. I swallowed. I'd found that line in the budget by accident, really. A misfiled PDF in a shared drive. But once I'd seen it, I couldn't unsee it. He said your captain had petitioned to have that money redirected, she said. Filled out forms, chased signatures, argued with men who believed keeping the lights on in a church basement was not a strategic priority. Her eyes crinkled slightly. Apparently, she can be very persuasive. A few people laughed under their breath. I stared at the floor, cheeks burning. The money came, Sister Agnes said simply. In the nick of time. We kept the shelter open. The women stayed. One of them, She paused, her voice softening. Was a girl of 16 whose stepfather was looking for her with a gun. He came here 3 nights in a row, pounding on the doors, shouting that we were harboring a criminal. The lock held. Our resolve held. And because we had the funds to keep security measures in place, we did not have to send her back out into the dark. She let that hang there, heavy and real. Today she is in another state, the nun said. Safe, in school, rebuilding a life. She sends us postcards sometimes, always signs them with a new name. A name she chose. A name she gets to keep because someone moved money on a spreadsheet 300 miles away. Her gaze sharpened. That someone, she said, was her. A small sound escaped me. It wasn't quite a sob, not quite a laugh. Something in between. I had known, in the abstract, that the grant mattered. I had seen the confirmation email, the line item change. I had moved on to the next crisis. I had not pictured a specific girl, a specific gun, a specific door holding against specific fists. Do not tell me we do not need soldiers here, Sister Agnes said, turning back to Russell. When their work has already wrapped itself around these walls like a shield. Russell looked rattled. His mouth opened and closed a few times. I didn't know, he said finally. That is the trouble, isn't it? She replied without heat. We pass judgment on what we do not see. We call the fruit poison without looking at the root it grew from. She faced me again, her expression gentler. You have already protected this place once, she said. Now there is another kind of danger at our doors. They shout instead of cut funding. They throw bricks instead of legislation. Different tools, same intention. To make the vulnerable feel unwelcome. Her eyes locked onto mine. Can you help us again, Captain? She asked. Not as a conqueror, as a protector, as one of us who learned different skills and brought them home. My throat felt tight. Yes, sister, I said. If you'll have me. She smiled, small but genuine. I never let you go. Around us the tension shifted. It didn't disappear. Fear rarely does with a single speech. But it changed flavor. Some of the suspicion aimed at my uniform eased, redirected toward the real threat. The unknown faces outside, not the familiar one inside. Father Miguel exhaled, shoulders dropping a little. Perhaps, he said carefully, glancing at Russell. We can hear what Captain Lawson suggests. There may be ways to increase safety that do not turn the sanctuary into a fortress. There are, I said quickly. I'm not here to put rifles in the pews. I'm here to look at sightlines, exits, weak points, to train volunteers on what to do if someone tries to force their way in, to coordinate with the local patrol so they actually know what's inside this building and who depends on it. And the weapons? Russell asked, still wary. I met his gaze. I carry one, I said. By regulation. But I have no intention of drawing it inside this church unless there is no other choice. My first line of defense is planning, not bullets. Sister Agnes gave a small nod, as if that answer satisfied something old and deep in her. Then let us plan, she said. As the group moved toward a side room to look at maps and schedules, she leaned closer to me, her hand briefly resting on my forearm. You did well, she whispered. I argued with a deacon in front of the altar, I murmured back. She smiled, eyes bright with mischief that time hadn't dimmed. Jesus overturned tables when people misused holy space. You merely rearranged some opinions. I huffed a quiet laugh. I missed you, sister. I know, she said. Now stop missing and start working. The war is not always where they tell you it is. As we walked toward the meeting room together, my boots echoing in the nave I'd once tiptoed through as a child, I realized something that hadn't fully crystallized until that moment. I had spent years thinking of my life in two halves, soldier and daughter, uniform and pew, mission briefs and hymnals. I'd believed, on some level, that one half canceled out the other in the eyes of people who mattered to me. But here, in this old church that smelled like candle wax and memory, an elder nun had just stitched those halves together with a single sentence. She saved us. I didn't feel like a savior. I felt like a woman mainly trying not to screw up. But maybe, just maybe, there was room in this story for both. The girl who learned to pray in these pews and the captain who learned to fight elsewhere. Maybe I hadn't left them behind when I left. Maybe I'd just been quietly circling back. And this time, I wasn't coming alone. The side meeting room off the nave looked smaller than I remembered. As a kid, it had been the place where they held catechism classes and youth group meetings, where folding chairs squeaked and someone's baby always cried halfway through. Now, sandwiched between a bulletin board and a dented filing cabinet, I saw the new reality. A wall calendar with shelter nights, highlighted in yellow, a whiteboard full of volunteer schedules, and a laminated sheet titled Emergency Procedures, taped slightly crooked near the door. I took it all in as we filed inside. Father Miguel, Deacon Russell, 3 council members, and Sister Agnes, who moved more slowly than the rest, but somehow still got to her chair first. "We're not equipped for whatever this is," one of the council members said as he sat. "We're a church, not a fortress." "You're a refuge," I said, pulling a folded notebook from my jacket pocket. "That's always been more than just words on a bulletin." Father Miguel gestured to the table. "What do you need from us, Captain?" "First, I need information," I said. "What exactly has happened so far? Not rumors, incidents." They traded looks. Russell exhaled sharply through his nose. 3 weeks ago, he began grudgingly, someone spray-painted the front doors. Blood on your hands, and no more collaborators. We cleaned it before Sunday Mass. "Did you report it?" I asked. "We did," said one of the council members. The officer who came said it was probably kids. They increased patrols for a few days. "Then last week," Father Miguel added, "someone broke a basement window. Nothing was taken, but a brick was found inside with a note taped to it. You can't hide them forever." My jaw tightened. "Them?" "The undocumented families," Sister Agnes said calmly. "Or the women, or anyone else someone has decided doesn't deserve sanctuary. Take your pick." "And yesterday," another council member said quietly, "one of our volunteers found 2 gas cans behind the building, half full. No reason for them to be there." I nodded slowly, connecting the dots. Escalation, vandalism to implied threat, to groundwork for arson. Whoever this is, they're moving up a ladder. "Or trying to scare us into thinking they are," Russell countered. "There's a difference between empty theater and real danger." "Empty theater doesn't buy gas," I said. "Or it doesn't usually bother hiding it." He bristled. "So what then? You want to put armed guards at every entrance? Turn the church steps into a checkpoint?" "No," I said. "I want to make this building harder to hurt and easier to escape. I want the people who sleep in that basement to know exactly what to do if a worst-case scenario happens, so they don't freeze when seconds matter. And I want whoever is doing this to realize they're not dealing with a soft target." "Soft target," one of the council members repeated, the phrase sitting uncomfortably on his tongue. "It's how people like this think," I said. "They look for places where people are busy helping, not watching their back. They rely on you assuming God will protect us, and not locking the side door because it's inconvenient for the choir." That hit home. A few uncomfortable glances flickered around the table. "How many entrances does the building have?" I asked. "4, said a woman named Maria, who ran the shelter schedule. "The main front doors, the side door by the parking lot, the basement door, and the back door near the kitchen." "Which ones are usually unlocked during events?" "Front and side," she said. "Sometimes the back when we're bringing in food deliveries." "The basement?" I pressed. Locked, she said firmly. Always. Only shelter staff have keys. Good, I said. That stays non-negotiable. First thing, front and side doors need better lighting. Motion activated if budget allows. Cameras if possible. Even cheap ones deter some idiots. Second, we need to run an evacuation drill. Russell made a face. You expect us to rattle already frightened parishioners by making them pretend the church is on fire. I expect you to give them a muscle memory that could save their life, I said. The first time people hear a door crash open or smell smoke shouldn't be the first time they think, which way do I go? We've never. Father Miguel hesitated. We've never had to do something like that. Then you're overdue, I said gently. Emergencies don't check calendars. Maria nodded slowly. We could do it after Mass. Explain ahead of time. Make it part of caring for each other. Exactly, I said. Frame it as what it is. An act of love, not fear. And you? Russell asked. Where do you fit in all this, Captain? You're not exactly staying here full-time to play fire marshal. I can't stay full-time, I admitted. I have to be back on base in 3 days. But in 3 days, I can map your exits, test your locks, coordinate with the local patrol chief so he knows there's a shelter here with high-risk residents, and train a small team of volunteers on basic response. How to spot suspicious behavior, how to call in a threat with clear information, how to get people out quickly. And if the worst happens while you're not here, he pressed. Then hopefully we've done enough on the front end that they don't panic, I said. And the officer answering the 911 call knows exactly where the basement door is and how many people might be behind it. It wasn't a guarantee. There are never guarantees. Anyone who says otherwise is selling something or running for office. But what I was offering was better than hope and habit alone. There's another piece, I added. The crowd outside. Father Miguel frowned. There's a crowd? Not yet, I said. But threats like this don't happen in a vacuum. They grow in an environment. Social media, talk radio, shouting matches on street corners. You might not see them in here, but they're forming somewhere out there. He looked troubled. We preach peace, unity. We stay out of politics as much as we can. That's the problem, I said. Some people don't consider protecting the vulnerable political. Others do. And the ones who do will shove you into whatever category suits their rage. You can't control how they label you. You can only control how you prepare. Russell leaned back in his chair, rubbing his forehead. This is a lot. Yes, Sister Agnes said. So is having your windows broken and your women hunted. So is losing a child in a fire because nobody practiced walking out calmly. I prefer this kind of a lot. Her tone was gentle but firm. It left little room for romanticizing unpreparedness. Maria cleared her throat. I'll get the floor plans, she said, standing. We can start with the basement. As she left, Sister Agnes turned those sharp eyes back on me. You said you have 3 days? Yes, sister. She nodded once, as if approving the constraint. Then let us not waste them. The next hours blurred into a kind of holy logistics. Maria spread the building's floor plans across the table, anchoring the corners with hymnals. I traced entrance and exit points with my finger, asking questions, marking choke points. Where do the children line up for Sunday school? Where do people smoke after Mass? Which doors stick in the winter? We walked the building together, my boots echoing in hallways that had once felt like labyrinths when I was small. The basement smelled like detergent and stale coffee, the kind of utilitarian comfort that comes from cots, plastic bins of donated clothes, and a bulletin board full of hotline numbers. A woman in a faded hoodie glanced up as we entered, eyes wary. Her boy, maybe 6, clung to her leg, gaze flicking to my uniform and then away. It's okay, Maria murmured to her. This is Amara. She grew up here. She's helping us make things safer. The woman nodded, not quite reassured. People who've had to run from danger learn not to trust reassurances. They trust locks, exits, quiet competence. I knelt so I was eye level with the boy. "Hey," I said softly. "You like secret tunnels?" He blinked, confused. "We're finding all the secret ways out," I said. "So if we ever have to leave fast, you'll know exactly where to go. Want to see one?" He looked up at his mom. She hesitated, then nodded once. I led him to the back stairwell, showing him how the door opened onto the alley where the fence gate latch was, how the path wrapped around to the main street. I let him open the door himself, his small hand gripping the metal bar, the weight of responsibility looking surprisingly natural there. "You're our explorer," I told him. "It's your job to remember this way. Think you can do that?" He straightened, something like pride straightening his spine. "Yeah." "Good," I said. "That helps all of us." His mother watched, some of the wariness easing. In that moment, I realized how starved these families were for a sense of being actively protected instead of reluctantly tolerated. Back upstairs, I met with the local patrol sergeant in a cramped office that smelled like coffee and printer ink. I'd called ahead, using my rank and base affiliation to get him to show in person instead of sending a junior officer. "Look," I said once we were alone. "I know you're stretched thin. I know you've got protests, calls, and not enough bodies. I'm not asking you for miracles. I'm asking you to understand what's inside this building." He scanned the floor plans I'd marked up, brows drawing together. "You've done more work on this than some of my rookies do on their beats," he said. "With respect, Sergeant, your rookies can go home and forget this street exists at the end of their shift," I said. "These folks can't. The women downstairs can't. This is not an optional location for them. It's their entire fallback plan." He sighed. "What are you asking for, specifically?" "Drive-bys at irregular intervals after dark," I said. "Not predictable loops someone can time. A direct line from Maria, or one of the shelter leads to call if they see someone casing the building that doesn't send them into hold. A human being, not just a dispatcher reading a script. And if a fire call comes from here, I want your team already picturing this basement door in their heads instead of wasting 30 seconds asking where it is." "That's a lot," he said, but there wasn't resistance in his tone. Just weariness. "I can help," I offered. "I'll send you a one-page brief on this building. Points of entry, where people sleep, where children gather. Nothing classified. Just enough to make this place real on paper, not just an address." He studied me for a moment. "You from around here?" "Yeah." He nodded slowly. "Okay, Captain Lawson. I'll do what I can. No promises about miracles." "I'm not asking for miracles," I said. "Just better odds." That night, we held the first evacuation drill. We warned the congregation ahead of time. Father Miguel explained from the pulpit that, as part of caring for each other, we were going to practice leaving the building quickly and calmly in case of emergency. There were grumbles, nervous laughter, a few outright refusals from older parishioners who muttered about panic-mongering. But when the bell rang, one clear, steady tone, the signal we'd agreed on, most people moved. Ushers directed them to nearest exits instead of everyone bottlenecking through the front. Volunteers guided elderly parishioners. Parents corralled wandering toddlers. It wasn't perfect. A cluster got stuck near the side door when someone stopped to grab a purse and refused to move. One man tried to argue his theology with an usher in the aisle about living in fear. But overall, it worked. Outside in the parking lot, people milled around in the cool evening air, murmuring. The fear was there, yes, but so was something else. A sense of having done something tangible, a sense of being more than passive targets. "You see?" I said quietly to Russell, who stood with arms crossed, watching. "Nobody combusted. Nobody lost their salvation. They just learned how to walk together a little faster." He exhaled, a reluctant smile tugging at his mouth. I'll admit, he said. It was less chaotic than I expected. That's the point, I said. We let them do chaos here so they don't freeze there. I nodded toward the street. In a real emergency, practiced chaos becomes organized movement. He was quiet for a moment. I was wrong about you, he said finally, not quite looking at me. About me? I asked. Or about what a soldier looks like? Both, he said. I grew up with one picture in my head. Guys with rifles kicking down doors on the news. It's hard to reconcile that with this. He gestured around at the church, the parking lot full of people. The picture isn't wrong, I said. It's just incomplete. There are guys with rifles kicking down doors for bad reasons. There are also guys with rifles kicking down doors to get trafficked kids out. There are analysts who never touch a weapon but decide whether bombs fall. There are logistics officers moving money from places it's wasted to places it saves lives. And there are captains who grew up in churches like this, trying to make sure nobody has to pick between safety and sanctuary. He studied me with a more open gaze than earlier. Why did you join? He asked. Really? I thought of the little girl I used to be, lying on my back under glow-in-the-dark stars, listening to sirens outside and wondering why some neighborhoods seemed to matter more than others. Because I was tired of being at the mercy of other people's decisions, I said. I wanted to be in the room where choices were made, and because I believed I could help. Not just my country in some vague sense, people I would never know. And now? He asked. After everything you've seen? Now I know I can help some, I said. Not as much as I wish. More than I used to. Enough to keep going. He nodded slowly. Thank you, he said, for enduring my ignorance. I huffed a small laugh. Deacons don't usually say ignorance about themselves. Elder nuns with long memories are effective teachers, he replied dryly, glancing toward where Sister Agnes stood chatting with a cluster of parishioners. She reminded me that humility isn't optional in my job description. Same in mine, I said. As the crowd filtered back inside for the closing hymn, Sister Agnes slipped to my side like she'd been there all along. You see, she murmured, the world didn't end. Not yet, I said. Give us time. Humans are persistent. She chuckled. You did well, child. Thank you, sister. She looked up at me, eyes sharp. But you still haven't told him, she said. Told who what? I asked, thrown. Your commanding officer, she said simply. That you're not just patching holes in someone else's ship, that you're ready to build a better one. I stared at her. You make it sound so easy. It's not, she said. That's why most people never do it. They stay busy mopping instead of fixing leaks. But you? She tapped the floor with the tip of her cane. You're restless. Don't deny it. I opened my mouth to protest, then shut it. She wasn't wrong. I'd spent months feeling a quiet dissatisfaction I hadn't been able to name. Missions completed, commendations given, but a nagging sense that I was always reacting, never shaping. I'm just a captain, I said. For now, she replied. So was every general once. So was every woman who ever changed anything. Don't let the rank on your collar be the ceiling in your mind. Changing ships is too big, I said slowly. That takes policy, budgets. People who like the way things are tend to keep them that way. Then start small, she said. Start where you have your feet. This church, this shelter, this neighborhood. You already learned how to move numbers on a page. Learn how to move hearts attached to those numbers. The rest will come. Start where you have your feet. I repeated it under my breath, letting the words settle. Outside, a car horn blared on the street. Inside, someone began picking out the first notes of a hymn on the organ. The light through the stained glass shifted, as the sun dipped lower, throwing new colors across the same old stone. I suddenly realized I was holding my shoulders differently. Less like someone waiting to be judged, more like someone who'd just been given a mission. 3 days, I said. It doesn't feel like much. 3 days, Sister Agnes said, is how long it took for the worst thing in our story to become the best thing. Her eyes twinkled. You of all people should understand what can happen in 72 hours. Images flickered through my mind. Rapid deployments, operations compressed into small windows, lives altered in the space between dawn and dusk. She patted my arm. Do what you can with the time you have. Then trust that the work continues beyond your sight. That sounds like faith, I said. It is, she replied, and strategy. That night, after the last parishioners had gone home and the shelter settled into the restless quiet of shared sleep, I stood alone in the nave. Candles flickered near the statue of the Virgin, casting soft halos on the stone. The building creaked in its old bones. Somewhere in the walls, the heating system wheezed. I walked down the aisle in the dark, my hand trailing along the back of the pews, and stopped in the third row where Grandma and I used to sit. I slid into the spot, the wood familiar against my back, the kneeler still as hard on my knees as it had always been. I didn't kneel, though. Not yet. I sat and stared at the crucifix, at the man carved into suffering and victory all at once, and let the day replay. You saved us, Sister Agnes had said. I didn't feel like a savior. I felt like an overqualified security consultant with a headache and 3 days to patch vulnerabilities that had taken decades to form. But maybe saving didn't always look like pulling someone from a burning building. Maybe sometimes it looked like making sure the building never caught fire in the first place. Like moving money on a spreadsheet. Like teaching a 6-year-old the quickest way to an exit. Like showing up, even when you weren't sure you were wanted. I thought of Deacon Russell's first words when I'd walked in. We don't need soldiers here. Once, that would have gutted me. Today, it had stung, yes, but it hadn't defined the moment. It had been corrected, gently but firmly, by someone whose authority came from lived experience, not rank. That's what had shifted something in me. Not the secretary's praise in another story, not the medals on my chest, but an old nun in a navy habit looking at me and deciding I belonged to the story of this church too. You don't have to pick, I whispered into the empty air, testing the words. Soldier or daughter, protector or believer. You can be both. The silence didn't argue. I finally slid off the pew and onto my knees, the kneeler digging into my shins. I didn't fold my hands, didn't close my eyes. I just breathed. I don't know what I'm doing, I said quietly. To God, to the empty church, to myself. But I know this feels right. Using what I've learned out there to protect what I love in here. If that's wrong, you're going to have to send someone higher ranking than a deacon to tell me. A small, involuntary smile tugged at my mouth. I didn't hear a voice. No thunder rolled, no doves descended. But the knot in my chest loosened slightly. And for now, that was enough. Tomorrow I'd start training volunteers. I'd meet with the patrol sergeant again. I'd draft a short, blunt memo for my own CO, outlining what we'd done here and why it mattered. Maybe planting a seed for a program bigger than this one church. In a few days I'd drive back through the city, past streets that had watched me grow, past protests and graffiti and patrol cars, back through the gate where salutes and protocols waited. I'd go back to my unit carrying something new. The knowledge that my work didn't stop at the edge of base property. That the skills I'd honed in war zones had a place in sanctuaries too. And somewhere in the back pew of an old stone church, an elder nun would keep telling anyone who'd listen about the girl who left, put on a uniform, and came back not as a conqueror, but as a shield. She saved us, they would say. But I knew the truth was more complicated, more ordinary, more human. We were saving each other, in pieces, with drills and prayers, with arguments and apologies, with budgets and bricks and letters sent from far away. One small fortress of mercy at a time. The first real test came sooner than anyone wanted. It was my last night before heading back to base. The drills were done, the patrol briefed, the locks checked twice. We'd tightened what we could in 3 days, teaching people where to stand, where not to stand, how to move without trampling each other. It still didn't feel like enough. It never does. St. Bridget's basement hummed with the restless sounds of sleep. Low murmurs, the occasional cough, the soft rustle of someone turning over on a cot. Upstairs, the church was dark, except for the red sanctuary lamp beside the tabernacle and a few security lights we'd convinced the council to leave on. Outside, the neighborhood held its breath. I sat in the tiny office off the basement, staring at the screen of an old donated laptop, drafting a report to my CO. The cursor blinked at the end of a sentence I'd rewritten 4 times. Recommendation: formalize base community liaison procedures for faith-based shelters in high-risk areas, using St. Bridget's as a pilot example. I rubbed my eyes. I'd spent years writing after-action reports and mission briefs, learning how to make life-and-death decisions sound clinical on paper. This felt different. Less like documenting something that had happened, and more like trying to convince the system to care about something it hadn't been built to see. A soft knock at the doorframe pulled me back. "Captain?" It was Maria, her hoodie zipped up to her chin. "Sorry to bother you. There's someone upstairs." My spine straightened. "Police?" She shook her head. "No, some guy. Mid-30s, maybe. He's pacing by the front doors, looking in the windows. We locked up already." "Did he try the handle?" I asked, already standing. "Twice," she said. "I went up to tell him we were closed, but something felt off. He smiled too much. Asked if we were still housing traitors. I backed away and came to get you." I swallowed the immediate response. You did exactly the right thing, and just nodded. "Okay. Get everyone who's awake away from the windows. Keep the basement door closed and locked. If you hear raised voices or anything that sounds like glass breaking, follow the plan." She nodded, fear and steadiness wrestling in her eyes. "You going up there alone?" "Yes," I said. "If it escalates, I want you free to start moving people, not stuck in the middle of it." She hesitated. "Be careful." "Always," I said. Upstairs, the church felt bigger in the dark. My boots were quiet on the nave floor. I'd learned how to move silently in worse places than this. As I approached the vestibule, I heard it. The hollow rattle of the front door handles being tested again. The faint scrape of rubber soles pivoting on concrete. I took a slow breath, centering myself the way we'd practiced before breaching unknown spaces. Check your body. Heart steady, hands loose, jaw unclenched. Check your mind. No scripts, just principles. Preserve life. De-escalate if possible. End the threat if you have to. Then I stepped into the vestibule. Through the narrow glass pane beside the door, I saw him. White guy, maybe mid-30s, baseball cap pulled down low, jacket too big for the weather. His eyes were bright in a way I didn't like. He was alone, for now. I flicked on the vestibule light. He flinched, then peered in, cupping his hands around his face to see past the reflection. When he spotted me, his mouth curved into a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "Evening," I said, keeping my voice calm but carrying. "We're closed." He tilted his head. "You're never closed," he said, his voice muffled by the glass. "That's your whole thing, right? All are welcome." "We keep certain hours like everyone else," I said. "If you need food or shelter, come back at 9 in the morning. We'll do what we can then." He laughed softly. "I'm not here for food. I'm here for justice." There it was. The script. I stepped closer, but not too close, keeping the door between us. Justice for who? For everyone you people sold out, he said, the smile dropping. You think we don't know what you're doing? Hiding criminals, giving aid to invaders, teaching people to hate their own country? His words were too polished to be his alone. I could hear talk radio in them. Comment threads, video rants. He'd been mainlining other people's fear until it felt like his own revelation. This is a church, I said. We feed people. We house them when they're running from violence. That's not betrayal. He snorted. You're harboring illegals. You're sheltering women who make false accusations against good men. You're helping weak people dodge consequences. That's treason. Big word, I said, filing away his phrases. You a lawyer? He bristled. I don't need a degree to know right from wrong. No, I said. You don't. But you do need better information. Don't talk down to me, he snapped, jiggling the handle again. Open the door. I just want to look around. Not happening, I said. His eyes narrowed. You afraid? Cautious, I corrected. We've had threats. I take them seriously. I left a message, he said. I said we'd be back. You can't say you weren't warned. My stomach dropped. Brick, note, gas cans. You with a group? I asked. Maybe, he said. Maybe not. Point is, this place doesn't belong to you anymore. You turned it into a base for enemies. We're just reclaiming it. His hand slipped into his jacket pocket. My pulse spiked. I shifted my weight, left hand hovering near my holster, but not touching it yet. Don't escalate without seeing the threat. Take your hand out of your pocket slowly, I said, voice firm, palm open, fingers spread. He sneered. You think you're in charge because you've got the uniform on? He yanked his hand out. For a split second, every muscle in my body braced for a gun. Instead, he was holding a lighter. He flicked it once, flame flaring and dying. Twice. On the third try, it held, a small, dancing tongue of fire. Gas is cheap, he said. Faith is cheap. Fire is cleansing. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. I pictured the gas cans behind the building, the old wooden beams in the basement ceiling, the cots, the children. Put it out, I said. He smiled and moved the flame closer to the glass, watching it reflect. You gonna stop me from out there? I met his eyes, letting him see exactly how serious I was. Yes. His gaze flicked briefly to my hip, where the outline of my holster was visible under my jacket. You gonna shoot me? In front of your God? If you try to burn a building full of people alive, I said evenly, I will do whatever it takes to stop you. He laughed, but there was a tremor in it. You won't. You're soft. All you soldier types are soft now. Rules, sensitivity training. Can't even say what's right without getting canceled. You came here looking for someone to hurt, I said. You think that makes you strong. It doesn't. It makes you a coward. His eyes flashed. Good. Anger, not zealotry, I could work with. Anger could be redirected. Walk away, I said. Right now. Before you do something you can't take back. You don't give orders here. He spat. I heard a soft creak behind me. Without turning, I knew someone had stepped into the nave. Probably Maria, drawn by the voices. I didn't dare glance back. If you walk away now, I said, this is just a bad night. Some vandalism, some threats. You'll go home, sober up from whatever this is, and realize you didn't cross that line. He tilted his head. What line? The one between angry and monstrous, I said. The lighter flame wavered between us, throwing strange shadows on his face. You don't get it, he said. You left. You went over to their side. You think you're one of them now. His lip curled. Traitor in a pretty suit, Maybe, I said. But I also came back. To this place. To these people. To stop men like you from making the world smaller and crueler than it already is. He sneered. Oh, you're a hero now? No, I said. Just someone who knows what fire does to bodies. That made him blink. Good. Specificity rattled abstraction. I've seen what's left when people decide burning something is the only way to feel powerful, I said quietly. It doesn't look like justice. It looks like families who can never identify their dead. His jaw worked. His grip tightened on the lighter. Flame licked higher, then dipped. You think I care? He muttered, but some of the heat had gone out of his voice. I took a slow breath. De-escalate. Give him a way out that preserves whatever fractured self-image he has left. You care about something, I said, or you wouldn't be here. You're not numb. You're angry. Angry at a world that moved without you. At people who got help when you didn't. At a church that chose to shelter some folks you decided don't deserve it. His eyes widened. I'd hit something. You don't know anything about me, he snapped. You're right, I said. I don't. Maybe you got laid off. Maybe your dad died alone in a hospital during the pandemic and you think nobody cared. Maybe your wife left. Maybe you asked for help once and got a pamphlet instead. His throat bobbed. I don't know your story, I said. But I do know this. Lighting a match here doesn't fix any of it. It just spreads your pain to people who had nothing to do with it. He looked away, jaw clenched. The lighter shook slightly in his hand. Walk away, I repeated, softer now. Take your pain somewhere it can be understood. A therapist, a support group. Hell, yell at a politician's voicemail. But don't pour it on people sleeping in a church basement. Silence stretched. Behind me, I heard the faintest whisper of Sister Agnes's voice, low and steady in the nave. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew a Hail Mary cadence when I heard it. The man's eyes flicked back to mine. You really think I'm a coward, he said. I think you're hurt, I said, and scared, and looking for a script that tells you what to do with that. The one you picked up put a lighter in your hand on a church doorstep at midnight. You can choose a different one. His mouth twisted. You sound like a shrink. I sound like someone who's buried enough people, I said. I don't want to add your name to the list. His hand trembled. Then, with a sharp flick, he snapped the lighter closed. The tiny flame vanished. Relief washed through me so hard my knees nearly gave. I didn't let it show. Good choice, I said quietly. He shoved the lighter back into his pocket, breathing hard like he'd just run a sprint. This isn't over, he muttered. But it sounded less like a threat, and more like someone trying to salvage pride. For your sake, I said. I hope it is. Police patrols have your description. There are cameras now. Next time, there will be fewer words and more consequences. He glared at me one last time, then turned and walked down the church steps, his shoulders hunched. I watched until he reached the sidewalk, joined no one, and disappeared into the dark. Only then did I exhale. Maria, I called softly without turning. You still there? Yes, she whispered from the nave. Sister Agnes, too. Call the sergeant, I said. Give him the description we wrote down. Tell him the guy came back, tried the door, made threats, showed a lighter. They need to know he escalated from property to intent. Okay, she said, hurrying off. I finally let myself lean against the wall, my hand hovering near my holster. I hadn't drawn. I hadn't fired. I'd walked the razor-thin line between force and restraint, and somehow not fallen off. Soft footsteps approached. Sister Agnes appeared beside me, her face pale but composed. You did well, she said. I almost pulled on him, I admitted. If he'd had a weapon instead of a lighter. You would have been right to, she said simply. Protecting the flock sometimes means baring teeth. Tonight, words were enough. Tomorrow, who knows? But you did not shy from either. My hands finally began to shake. She noticed, and without comment, slid her small, cool hand into mine. You see, she said softly. They tell stories about violence, about soldiers as destroyers. But I will tell this one instead. The night a soldier stood between a spark and a sanctuary and refused to let the fire start. It could have gone wrong, I said. One wrong word, one flinch. He could have lit it anyway. Yes, she said. And still, you stepped into the vestibule. That is what courage looks like. Not certainty. A willingness to act without it. I'm leaving tomorrow, I said, the weight of it pressing in. What if he comes back when I'm gone? Then he will find a church that knows how to move, she said, a patrol that knows where the doors are, and a nun who's not afraid to whack him with a cane while the children slip out the back. A startled laugh broke out of me. The image was absurd and somehow completely believable. It's not enough, I said quietly. It never feels like enough. It's more than we had last week, she replied. You cannot make the world safe. You can only make your corner less easy to burn. The next morning, after a too early breakfast of church coffee and day-old pastries, I stood by my car with my bag in the trunk, keys in hand. The street was bright now, the church washed in ordinary daylight. No sign of midnight threats. Just kids on bikes and someone walking a dog past the front steps, like it was any other Tuesday. Father Miguel came out to say goodbye, dark circles under his eyes but a lighter set to his shoulders. We owe you a great deal, he said. More than I can put in a thank you card. You owe me nothing, I said. Just stick to the plan. Keep the shelter running. Don't prop the side door open with a chair because someone forgot their key. He chuckled, then sobered. I was wrong, he said slowly, about what it means to bring you here. I thought soldiers only brought conflict into sacred spaces. I didn't see how much conflict was already at the door. Seeing it is the first step, I said. The second is not looking away. He nodded. We won't. Maria stepped out next, hugging me tight. The women wanted me to tell you thank you, she said. They can't say it themselves, some because they're scared, some because they don't have the words in this language yet. But they know. Tell them I know too, I said, and that I wasn't brave enough to be where they are. It takes a different kind of courage to flee everything you know. When she pulled back, I saw tears in her eyes. Come back sometime, she said. Even if it's just as Amara, no briefing, no drills. I will, I promised. Finally, Sister Agnes shuffled down the steps, leaning more heavily on her cane than usual. Don't you dare die up there, she said without preamble. I'll do my best, I said, smiling. Doctor's orders? Nun's orders, she corrected. Doctors fix bodies. I'm in the soul business. Her gaze softened. You carry too many ghosts already. I try to make sure they're worth carrying, I said. She nodded approvingly. Good. Let them sharpen you, not hollow you. She reached up, hands surprisingly steady, and adjusted the collar of my uniform the way a grandmother might. When people ask, she said, I will tell them this. Once upon a time, a girl from this block went away and became something the world could not quite name without arguing. Some called her soldier. Some called her traitor. Some called her hero. But here, in this little church, we will use the only name that matters. What name is that? I asked, throat tight. Daughter, she said simply. Our daughter, who learned to fight with her hands and her head and her heart, and who remembered where she came from when it mattered. My vision blurred. I blinked the tears back enough to see her clearly. Thank you, sister, I whispered. For what? She asked, feigning innocence. I merely told the truth. You did the hard parts. I laughed softly. Feels like you did some heavy lifting too. Oh, I did, she agreed. But that's what elders are for. To remind the young they are part of something older and bigger than uniforms and headlines. I hugged her carefully, aware of how light she felt in my arms, how much space she somehow took up in a room despite it. As I pulled away and opened my car door, she called after me. Captain? Yes? When they put you in whatever ship they're building, she said, and they strap you down and count backwards, remember this place. Not as a weight, as an anchor. An anchor keeps you from drifting into emptiness. I nodded, the words slotting into a place inside me I hadn't known was waiting. I will, I said. I'll carry you all with me, without letting you hold me down. Good girl, she said. Now go. There are other fires to prevent. I climbed into the car, started the engine, and pulled away from the curb. In the rearview mirror, the church grew smaller but didn't recede. It stayed with me, superimposed over the base entrance that would come next, over the launch pads and briefing rooms and long, sterile hallways of the world I was heading back to. On the drive, my phone buzzed with a message from my CO. Received your report. Interesting proposal. Let's discuss when you're back. Might be room to scale this sanctuary support idea. Good work, Captain. Sanctuary support. They'd probably give it a colder, more bureaucratic name before it ended up in a PowerPoint. Faith Adjacency Resilience Initiative, maybe. Community Stability Interface. I didn't care. All I cared about was what it meant. A recognition, however small, that what I'd done in those 3 days wasn't just a personal favor to my mother's church. It was a model, a template, a proof of concept that the lines between here and there, us and them, were more porous than the system liked to admit. I rolled the window down a crack, letting the city air wash through the car one last time before the base perimeter swallowed me back into its ordered world. The church leader had said, "We don't need soldiers here." The elder nun had whispered, "She saved us." The truth I'd learned lived somewhere between those two sentences and beyond them. They didn't need soldiers who saw sanctuaries as battlefields. They did need daughters who knew how to wield training like a shield instead of a sword. As the base gate came into view, the guard snapped to attention and saluted. I returned it, the motion crisp, my mind already shifting gears to the next mission, the next briefing, the next set of coordinates. But under the uniform, under the rank, under the titles people would keep trying to pin on me, something steadier pulsed. I was not just what the military made me. I was also what that small stone church had shaped, what an old nun had named. What a frightened boy in a basement would remember when he thought about the night the lady in the uniform showed him the secret way out. Soldier, daughter, shield, all of it, at once. And as long as there were doors that needed guarding and people sleeping behind them, I knew exactly which part of me would step forward first.